Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of the Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Welcome back to the Backyard Bouquet podcast. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my friend Galena Berkompas from Micro Flower Farm, a name that many of you might already know and admire. Recently, Galena and her family embarked on an incredible journey, moving their entire flower farming operation to a beautiful 6-acre property, paving the way for new adventures in gardening and community building. Galena has transformed a small urban space into a thriving flower farm in Southwest Washington, charming thousands with her exquisite seasonal blooms and ability to create a thriving flower farm on such a small plot of land. Beyond her farming success, she's a passionate educator dedicated to helping others discover the beauty and fulfillment of growing their own gardens. Today is a treat as Galena shares not only the beginnings of her flower farming journey, but also insights into her recent monumental move. So buckle up and get ready for an inspiring conversation. Galena, it's fantastic to have you with us today. Can you start by telling us what inspired you to dive into flower farming?
Sure. And thank you for having me, Jen. It's great to be here.
So excited to have you.
Yeah. My journey started back a few years ago in 2019 when I had just had my fourth baby. And back up a little bit, around the age of 13, I started having a lot of issues with chronic depression, which lasted into adulthood. And then throw in postpartum hormones. And after the birth of my fourth child, it just got really bad. Like, for anybody who struggled with depression, I like using the phrase, it's like the world had lost color, like everything was gray. So all of my coping mechanisms up until that point were just not working. So I was just looking for something that would spark joy in my life. And through my sister-in-law, I kind of just stumbled onto flowers and gardening. And believe it or not, up until that point, growing up, we had, done vegetables and like dabbled with certain stuff. And my mom grew roses, but I could not have told you what a zinnia was. Like, I know I'd seen them, but if somebody had said, "Hey, what's that called?" I'd been like, "I don't know." So like that was my level of how much I did not know. Um, but I'm also a little bit of an obsessive personality when it comes to something that I'm interested in. So I kind of latched on to flowers, filled my kitchen with all of these started everything from seed, started them way too early. Like I had 4-inch plants at the beginning of February,
Oh
which
my goodness.
I know. My husband was so patient. I accidentally had ordered the pink grow lights instead of the white grow lights. So imagine that in your kitchen
Oh
just
my goodness.
every day. It was something. I quickly got like blackout curtains to go around it because anyone who's ordered those lights, like they work, but they're pretty annoying to look at. And then I planted all of those out in early 2020. So, I found it kind of in 2019, grew them over the winter of 2019, planted like my first flower garden in 2020, which was approximately 600 square feet. And I fell so in love with everything about it. It brought me so much joy, so much peace. Um, I read everything I could get my hands on about growing, about gardening, about flowers. And I just decided then and there that this was what I wanted to do, which was honestly incredibly eye-opening to me on a personal level, because I was one of those people who just struggled with knowing what I was supposed to do with my life. Um, I had wanted to be a mom, and I was a mom. I had 4 kids at that point. But apart from being a mom, I had never really found the thing that I was really passionate about. And so finding this in the way that I did was just, honestly, I'm just so grateful, and like just incredibly grateful for the entire journey, and feel amazingly blessed that I'm able to do this.
Well, first, I want to acknowledge and say thank you for sharing that, because so many people struggle with depression. And so, thank you for your vulnerability in sharing that, because I know that speaks to so many others. I think that there's something magical about flowers that is really healing for so many different parts of our life, whether someone's grieving the loss of a family member, struggling with infertility, dealing with depression, or just kind of feeling at a crossroads, getting your hands in the dirt, as it's just healing. I don't know any other way to describe it other than
Yeah,
it's healing.
I agree.
Um, and wow, that was 4 years ago.
Yep. I mean, I think 2000, yeah, 4 years ago.
So with your 600 square feet of flowers,
Yep.
you realized that you fell in love with this, and this was healing and fulfilling and filled you up. And then you just realized you were all in, or what happened next?
Yeah, pretty much. First of all, I realized, well, this is an expensive hobby.
Yes.
So then I was like, well, it should at least pay for itself. But even at that point, like in the summer of 2020, I was like, I just want, I basically was selling $40 bouquets for $5, because I had no concept of pricing or like the value of local flowers. And I remember I had started my Instagram at that point just as kind of a way to document what I was doing. I remember a local farmer reaching out to me, and she's like, please charge more. And that was when I first started to delving into like the local flowers, and like respect for your other growers, and what labor really should be valued at, in terms of, that, like, that's a whole nother conversation. Um, and that's something that I'm very passionate about now, is not undervaluing yourself or what you do. But I think that that's something that everybody does struggle with, is imposter syndrome, and like
Mhm.
believing that what you are doing is actually worthwhile. And for anyone out there listening, if you struggle with that, you're not alone. I struggle with it too. Like, I think everybody does on some level, in some area of their life. Um, and I kind of think you just need to push through it, and recognize that what you're doing is giving value, and you should just respect that. Like, respect yourself enough to charge what it's worth. But yeah, like I was selling these $5 bouquets, um, and offering free delivery. And it took me about 3 weeks to be like, this is, I'm losing money very quickly, and
And your time.
spending all my time, and this isn't sustainable. And I think it was at that point that I actually started really considering, it's like, okay, what is a business plan? What is a way that, you can at least make it break even? And that's when I really started to delve into business. And around that time, it didn't take me long. I was like, okay, 600 square feet's not enough. I'm going to convert my 4,000 square foot front lawn into a cutting flower garden. Um, and that's what I started doing in August of 2020. So by the time November had rolled around, I had converted it all using no-till. It was ready to plant. I went from planting like 100 ranunculus to, for the 2021 season, I had planted 700. And I just determined, I was like, I set financial goals. I'm like, I'm going to push for it. I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone and find a way to make this work. And I quickly realized, which was maybe another slight surprise to me, that I loved the business side of it, because there's the growing side, but there's also the business side. And they're kind of two different things, even though people often smush them together.
Totally.
But I was passionate about both and I love both. And so I set really lofty goals for myself and then just pushed myself as hard as I could to reach them. And
Did you have a business background?
no, I don't.
That's amazing because so many people struggle without that background. And the fact that you had the ability to see the bigger picture and realize that you have to make this profitable because it's not sustainable. It's like you said, otherwise it's a very expensive hobby. Um,
Yes.
Early on, I remember Lisa Mason Ziegler said there are two types of flower growers. You're either a hobbyist growing as a cut flower grower, or you're a flower farmer making a profit. And that kind of always stuck with me.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that I do, like analyzing my own personality, that I do have that, even though I don't have a business background, I know is very beneficial, is that I have the ability, and it's both a pro and a con, but I have the ability to remove emotion from a decision.
Mm,
So I became very analytical, which was like, I love those flowers, but they don't make any money. So I'm not going to give space to them. Or if I do, I'm going to grow like a minuscule amount for me. So I kept, super detailed records about my labor, about what was like the most profitable, especially considering that I was working on such a small property. So maximizing the ground that I had mattered even more.
mhm.
And I think that that was one of the things that was definitely very instrumental in helping me reach my goals, as I was extremely strict with myself about cutting out the stuff that, yes, it's beautiful, but it's not going to bring a profit. It's kind of almost a net loss. And then just pushing on those avenues that were profitable.
That's so smart. And it's a really hard thing to do. I always struggle because there's flowers that I'm guilty of. I grow and they don't make me money, but I love them.
Hey, I do too. Roses. People are always like, do you sell your roses? I'm like, I really don't. Like, if I did weddings, I would, but those were my first love. Like, I always have loved roses. You have to grow some stuff for you.
Yes,
Yeah, it can't be completely emotionless, or not emotionless, because I love everything that I grow, but it can't be completely like, this is all going to be profitable.
totally. So when you decided to expand and you started looking at the numbers, obviously those $5 bouquets weren't serving you anymore. How did you shift your business to make money?
One of the things that I did right off the bat was I talked to a lot of the farmers around me. I looked at what our Portland wholesale market charged, and I knew that I couldn't charge less than that because that was a wholesale amount that florists were going to.
Mhm.
And I basically determined that whether I sold the flowers or not, I was going to have a price point and I was going to stick to it. And I was just not going to allow myself to essentially give flowers away for free. Because, like, let's be honest, if you're selling a $5 bouquet, just give it to them for free. like,
Yes.
like you might as well. um, so that was one of the things that I did. I also just looked at my own life, and considered the parts of it that I enjoyed. Like, what were the markets that I enjoyed the most? I adore spring flowers. Like, those are probably my top passion, with dahlias being a super close second. And um, and I had to consider the fact that I was also a homeschooling mom of 4 kids. So I had to think about, like, okay, how can I still be a mom and still be there, still make money without completely burning myself out? And so after 1 year of trying to do everything, and you'll understand this because you're from the Pacific Northwest, our summers are not long.
No.
And when you are doing the summer market like all the time, you basically have no time. So there was a point where I did everything. I did the spring market, I was doing education, I was doing dahlia tubers, I was doing the summer flowers. And I reached the end of that year and I felt like, I barely had any time for my family. I'd barely had time for myself. I was exhausted. I didn't even want to go out into my garden at one point, which I'm like, okay, that's not going to work.
That says something.
Yeah. And so I had to analyze it. And it was honestly really hard for me because all of those things were things I enjoyed. But that was when I made the decision. It's like, okay, I'm not doing summer CSAs anymore because, honestly, because of the ages of my kids. And I'm like, they're only going to be this age once. When they're older, I can put that back in. But right now I'm going to give the summer over more to spending time with them and letting them have, a summer. So I've kind of narrowed down on 3 things that work with our family, that work with the profitability aspect. And those are the spring flower market, which I did skip this year because we were moving. And I'm grateful that I had the foresight to do that because I probably would have died.
I could not imagine you doing both. That
Education and selling dahlia tubers. And eventually I would love to get into selling seeds as well. Like that's something that I'm super intrigued by it and interested in. I do think that's a couple years down the road, but I do see that happening in the future.
well, you certainly have the space for that now,
Right. Yeah.
which we will touch on in a little bit. So you got really specific
Mm-hmm.
with what you needed for your business, but also for your family. Can you just share with us real fast, what is the age range of your kids now?
So my youngest it's 5, 7, 9, 11. And
So
when
you're a busy mom.
yes. And when I started, my youngest was, um, well, he was born in 2019. So when I first planted, he was 1.
Okay.
And he was my little helper. And for all the moms of like toddlers, yes, there was one time and I had planted like 100 dahlia tubers and I had labeled them all. And I went inside to get some lunch and I came back and my 1-year-old had pulled up all the stakes
Oh no.
and they were just in this little pile. And I was like, well, I know what they are. So I just saved the stakes and then I had fun IDing them once they came up.
That's a
Um,
good patient mom.
yeah. But, I think you just have to be prepared with that if you're farming with small kids. There was another year where I had planted a lot of perennial tulips, but as you know, we grow tulips as annuals. So
Right.
I was pulling a lot with the bulb. And I turned around and I think he was 3 at that point. He was just going through my perennial patch and he was just yanking them up,
Oh
bulb.
no.
And I was like, no, 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 not those
Just
ones.
copying mom.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Those will become the good old days, the stories that you tell 15, 20 years from now and look back on and laugh.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, you're always really good in your stories on Instagram of showing that your kids are helping you on the farm. How do you engage your kids?
That one, I still feel like I'm trying to figure out a little bit because when I was growing up, I knew families in the community that I was adjacent to or in, and they had family businesses, but they basically made their kids work for free. And their kids' education suffered as a result of that. And I just remember, and these were my peers. So, nobody would have listened to me if I had said anything, but I didn't like it. And I
Uh-huh.
just, like, that's just really imprinted on my brain as something I was like, I don't want to do that. I think it's wrong on several levels. Um, so, but on the other hand, we are moving very quickly towards this being a family farm, like this being our livelihood. So, um, I'm still trying to figure out the approach. There are certain things where it's like, you know what? You need to learn a good work ethic. This is part of being a part of our family. So yes, you are going to come out and like last Saturday, you're going to come out and dig holes so we can finish planting these dahlia tubers. And yes, we know you don't like it, but it's literally an hour of your time and you're not going to die.
Yeah.
They were great. Their morale lagged a little bit towards the end because I miscounted, and my original thing was like, we need 3 rows, and then I was like, oh no, we need 4, and then I was like, oh, actually we need 5, and my 9-year-old was like, Mom. I'm like, okay,
I
Mom miscounted. Just do it. It's fine.
I have a 9-year-old and her attention span is about an hour. I can get her out there for about an hour at a time, and then it's time to go play. And
Yes. But our other approach, I think, will be is that as they get older and they're actually capable of doing more, we will pay them. And we're not just going to let them have the money. It will just go into savings accounts for them when they turn 18.
Mhm.
Because at this point, if I paid them like I would a normal worker, they might be spending several $1,000s on Lego sets. And I just feel like they might regret
Totally.
that when they're 18.
Yes,
So I think it will be an approach of like, you can have, 15% of it and the rest is going to go into account, which you will get when you're 18. And that's a way that we can give them a start in life. But in my brain, if you are depending upon free labor, then your farm is not sustainable. So it's pretty important to me that if there's other labor involved and it's a significant amount, that they are being paid for it.
absolutely. I completely agree. Right now, we're at the point of it's just trying to get my daughter out there so that she enjoys it and sees
Yeah.
the process. And I'm not counting on her for a plant's survival at this point in time.
Did last fall when I was still thinking I was going to do spring flowers. So, you and I both plant tulips in crates, and it's like
Mhm.
80 tulips in a crate. And I was dividing tubers, so I was like, hey, I'll pay my kids, I'll pay you to plant tulips in the crate. And I made the mistake of being like, I'll pay you $5 a crate. My 9-year-old very quickly realized that he could take a variety, dump it in, spread it out, and he was done with a crate in like a minute.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, well, this is a little bit more expensive than I was planning.
Smart kiddo.
He was smart because I had like 60 crates. And yeah, so anyway, if you ever have your daughter help you plant crates, I don't know, maybe $3 if you're quick about it.
That's good advice. I think it's really special, though, to involve the kids in the farm. I mean, whether they really get involved in it now, like I think of Marin and Farmer Finn, and I'm like,
Mhm.
my daughter's probably never going to be a Farmer Finn. I just don't see her being that into it, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
at least she's getting that introduction and getting to see the value of getting your hands in the soil.
Hmm.
And like you said, the hard work piece, like farming's not easy. And I think that, especially as female farmers, showing our kids that we can do something really hard is so valuable
I
at a
agree.
young age.
And if all they get out of it, like if none of them want to be farmers, that's fine. But if all they get out of it is a strong work ethic, I would be thrilled
Totally.
because um, I feel like I got a lot of mine from working on a chicken farm actually as a teenager.
Oh,
We had this old guy in our church community who ran a free range chicken farm. So he would do egg chickens, but meat chickens, and they were all grass fed, organic, and everything. But he would hire the teenagers he knew to come in when they processed the meat chicken. So it was like a very niche, uh, like market for people who are really interested in like organic pasture fed meat. Um, and it was 5 times a summer. He gave you minimal instruction, but it was like a safe work environment. And we found out later that his goal was honestly just to teach the kids in his community to work really hard.
that's
And
amazing.
it was such a good work experience. There was no space in there to be all clean and fancy like you were. My job was to basically gut and process chickens.
Wow.
and you were paid by how fast you were. So I got really fast at it, and I still think that that's one of the ways I can work very quickly now. But more importantly, like that is like the time in my life, that teenage year, every summer, where I feel like I learned how to work really hard and just be okay with not with dirt, with not being in a always clean. Um, although showers are great. But if like I can give my kids that experience and they can reach adulthood no matter what career they choose, I'll be thrilled, because I feel like if you have a desire to learn and a good work ethic, you can pretty much do anything that you want to in life.
I couldn't agree more. 100%. Well, you obviously learned a really good work ethic at a young age at that chicken farm. And that work ethic led you to turn your half-acre plot into a full-scale flower farm on a micro scale.
Yeah.
Tell us, so you grew from your front yard, you've eventually expanded to your entire property in a very short amount of time, correct?
Yes. So the first year was 600 square feet. The second year, which would be like my first business year, was probably, I want to say 8,000. And by the third year, which was our second business year, I had converted the entire property and moved over onto my neighbors as well, who was just like a super sweet older lady. Um, and that was a fun story because she had like this gorgeous, just completely sunny, really big, like dirt spot. And she was like, I just want to spray it with Roundup and dump water on it. And I was like, hey, like, let me just plant some zinnias. Like, I will do all the work. You can like pick whatever you want. Like, let me just try. And she gave me like this tiny row. And she's like, so many people stopped to talk to me, and I got so many compliments that she just like gave me the whole patch the following year.
Oh, I love that.
And I planted it all for her before we moved out. I just plan on
Oh,
going back there a couple times a year to like maintain it for her, and help her out, because yeah, we developed a great relationship, and it was honestly super special. So
I love that. So she was going to put Roundup down to keep the weeds out. And instead, you convinced her to plant flowers. And you didn't even use that for your production. That was just so
yeah,
she could experience the beauty.
yeah,
Amazing. Oh,
yeah,
I love that. That's really special. And what a gift you've given her too, that she gets to enjoy this year even when you're gone.
yeah. I hope so. Yeah. And I don't blame her for the Roundup. I was just like, for obvious reasons, hoping to like convince her otherwise, because her husband had had a stroke.
Mm,
She had 1 acre property. She's about 70. And he won't let her sell the property. So she has to maintain this whole property because they just have this very high standard of like everything has to look pristine. So she's just tired.
that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
maintaining a,
I wasn't being all judgy on her, but I was just like, hey, like, how about you let me just try this other thing?
I love that. Yes, an alternative to Roundup,
Yes.
creating beauty in its space. Um, and it brings in the beneficials,
Right.
which you are a no-till, no-spray farm. Is that correct?
Mostly no till. I did have to till this year because we moved literally at the beginning of June. There was no time to do anything else. Mostly no spray. I would say that um if I spray, it is like the last resort, but I'm not completely anti-spray. And when I talk about spraying, I am talking about organic sprays,
Mhm.
because I do feel like as a farmer, there are just certain points where you cannot afford to lose a crop. So I
Absolutely.
feel like everybody jumps to spraying way too quickly, and that there are so many other ways that you can manage pest invasions organically without ever spraying. But I would also just be honest and say that I'm not completely anti-spray, because I do think there are some very rare cases where you have to,
Yes.
in order to be able to continue to feed your family. Like, I think if you're gardening, there's a little bit more room to be very patient and maybe lose your garden one year because of a pest invasion. Farming, if it's your livelihood, there are cases. But I do think that people jump to spraying way too quickly. Um, and I mean, I can't even remember the last time I did, but honestly, I have before, but it's like 9.9 times out of 10, it's not happening.
Yes. Well, you have so many flowers that you attract so many beneficial insects.
Right.
So
Yes.
you probably have a pretty good front line of defense.
Right. That's what I feel like. I feel like, focusing on interspersing natives throughout
Mhm.
your fields is a great way. Companion planting, super good way. Encouraging a lot of bird populations. That's like the best way ever because they'll just snack on stuff all days. I like using Brix molasses, which I recently posted about to raise the sugar content in the plants just to make the insects not want to eat them. And that's probably the one that I have found with the birds makes the most amount of difference. And that, the bugs that you don't want are still there, but they're not doing anything. They're not touching your plants.
Right, because the bricks makes them undesirable. The taste
Right.
changes.
Yes. So I think that with time and effort, you can absolutely get to the point where even those super rare cases of spraying, you don't even need those. And that, I mean, I got there on my last property. It takes time to build up. So we'll see how quickly I reach that with this property, but I'm determined because, as we all know, spraying does not discriminate. So I'm extremely careful when I do it if I have to, but still, as a farmer, you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last year, I didn't have to spray once. I mean, I have my full year spray that
Yes.
doesn't have any pesticide or chemicals in it. It was the Hybrix molasses.
Yeah.
But that with monthly releasing of beneficials,
Hmm.
and I had a combination. It wasn't like I just released ladybugs. I had the lacewings and the minute pirate bugs
Yes.
and the cucumaris and Swarovski. I can never say the first word on it, but they're like the little mites that attack the spider mites. I mean, that and the Hybrix really kept everything under control. And we have a huge grasshopper population here. My
Hmm.
first few years, my dahlias were decimated by them. And last year, I still saw the grasshoppers, but like you said,
Yeah. They
they
just,
just left them alone.
I know. Did you end up ever having to like do the bags on them?
Nope. I
They,
should have though on my whites because the birds, I had so many birds and we had a lot of dew last year and I kept waking up in the morning and a lot of my whites would be brown. And I was like, what is going on with the
yeah.
petals? Why are they turning brown? Well, one morning I went out before the sun was up and I watched as the sun came up and there were birds perched all along my white dahlias. And it was their muddy feet were ruining.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was
But it
like,
wasn't
oh,
insects biting them, which I think
no.
is cool. Our problem is cucumber beetles. And
Oh,
when I was first started the brick stuff, I was kind of skeptical because I was like, come on, like it can't be that easy. Also,
mhm.
this thing's a little hooey. But then I was like, it can't hurt. It's just sugar. And I got to the point very quickly in the summer, and it was so weird. I had cucumber beetles sitting on my flowers, and there were no bite marks.
Wow.
They just, which was cool. So, um, I'm gonna do I mean, I will say that when I have sprayed, um, like I did it once when I bought some cuttings that were virused. Um, thrips, as we know, spread virus. So,
Yes.
um, but the only time that I have done it, and I always stop after this, is when the dahlias are super little before any of them are blooming because I'm like, no pollinators are going to be on these because there's nothing for them.
Mhm.
So that's the only time that I've resorted to it. And then after they're blooming, I'm like, nope, because it's just not worth it.
It's amazing when you walk through at nighttime and you see, it's one of my favorite things in the evening. You walk through and the
Yes.
bees have just like tucked themselves
Yes.
into the petals at the nighttime.
I have so many like videos of like all the little bumbles in the dahlia petals.
Yes.
It's my favorite too. I'm just like, oh, look at your cute little bodies.
Do you have frogs? Because I see like all the cute pictures with like frogs and the dahlias, and we don't have very many frogs here.
We had frogs at our last place, but I could never get a frog. I could never get a frog picture, which was kind of annoying to me because I'm like, I know I have a billion because my husband had made a wildlife pond.
Oh,
But for some reason, they stayed out of my dahlias. So I don't think we really have any here because we don't have any type of wetlands on this property.
uh-huh.
Um, but my husband is going to build another pond, so maybe.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
What about ducks? Will you have ducks?
I am going to get ducks, which is hilarious if you know me because I'm like, all right, nobody hate me, but I'm just not an animal person. My husband and I both grew up taking care of a lot of animals, and we had a lot of animals. And I think we were both just maybe a little burnt out.
Uh-huh.
We're very like we've done a lot of animal care. So when we were got married, we were like, no animals until we both agree, and we have to both agree on the animal. And I was pretty firm on that. And now I'm like, I moved to this property, and I was like, I want ducks, I want pygmy goats.
And he agreed.
Well, he did point out that goats aren't a great idea. And I was like, yes, you're right. Don't let me get them. They're so cute, though,
So cute.
because my family had goats growing up. And literally every time, like, the garden got just almost to the point of harvest, the goats would get out and eat it all.
Oh,
Dog.
no.
So, like, goats are extremely dangerous. Like, they only have to get out one time, and your stuff is decimated.
Oh,
So I was like, yes. I told my husband, I was like, you like do not let me give in and get goats.
well, now you have an entire audience also that's going to hold you accountable to
Right.
not getting goats
If
because
I
no one
go
wants,
to my feed, people will be like, don't do it.
yes, because everyone wants to see your new field full of dahlias. So
Yeah.
let's talk about you grew micro flower farm on a half an acre,
Mm-hmm.
and now you have moved to this massive property. How did that transition come about?
Well, so last fall or last summer, my husband and I seriously started talking. And it was a multi-pronged conversation because not only did like I was very motivated to move the farm to something bigger. But as a family, we also wanted more space for our kids because I had converted our half acre to full production. There was honestly no room for them to do anything. And that wasn't really how we wanted to raise them. We wanted them to have more outdoor experience. And some people listening to this might be like, well, they could still be out there in the flowers. And yes, they were. But working on such a small space, my pathways were so tiny that they were almost non existent. So I didn't really let anybody help me because it was a chore just for me to do stuff. It's like, you have 8 inches or 6 inches in some
Oh my
case.
gosh.
You're sidling down that, being really careful. And I was pretty much like, nobody is allowed to help me because nobody cares about these flowers like I do. So you're going to be like smashing stuff right and left. So we wanted more space for our family and we wanted more space for the farm. And um, honestly, 2 acres would have been fine. Like, I know that we were kind of not really more than 5. Um, but also, when you're looking for property, you can't be that picky. Like, you
Mhm.
might end up with 10, which I'm not sure what we would have done with that. But I think our goal was, my husband was more like, I want 2. And I was closer to, I want 5. We ended up with 6. But our original plan was to move this fall, was to start looking this fall. So basically, once the dahlias had been dug up, put our house on the market, find something in the fall, and move before shipping season starts, before, all that happens. Well, a friend of mine was moving to South Carolina, and we were texting one day, and she's like, Honestly, because they lived in a rental house while they were here. She's like, honestly, I just want to move into an Airbnb so I can get my rental house like completely ready without worrying about my 3 kids, you know, just
Mhm.
in the way. Um, and I was like, oh, Airbnb. And I literally just got on Airbnb and I was like, I wonder what's on Airbnb in our area. Because I just love real estate. So, she wasn't like, look on Airbnb for me, but I was just like, oh, I wonder what's on there. And I came across this farm that just literally made me gasp. Because back up a little bit, my husband and I are very picky. And we get along great, but when it comes to like buying property, we had a very specific list. Nothing had come up in like the whole year and a half when we were toying with the idea of moving that we both agreed on and was in our price range. I mean, there's plenty of
Mhm.
stuff that's absolutely gorgeous that's just like millions and millions, but pipe dream
Right.
for most of us. So we had just never found something. And this one, I just went through the pictures like 5 times and I closed down my browser and I made dinner and then I pulled it back up again and went through it again. And I was like, babe, come here. And he loved it just as much as I did. And I was like, I'm just going to message them. I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? They'll say no. They think, I'm a weird person. So I was, and that's out of like what I normally do because I'm usually probably overly respectful of people's personal space. I don't want to be a bother.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, hey, I was on Airbnb and if you're not interested in this, please know that I will not bother you. I will respect your space, but I'm a local farmer. I'm looking to expand our farm. I came across your property and it is everything that I've dreamed of. Have you ever considered selling? And the wife of the owner wrote back and she's like, well, we'd be open to talking about it. So we exchanged text numbers. She went and talked to her husband. They got back to us about a week and a half later. She's like, okay, to be open with you, we have a family friend and we told them that if we ever decide to sell, we would ask them first. So she basically was like, there's not much likelihood this is going to happen.
Mhm.
So another week went by and I was just honestly just prepared for it's not going to happen. But then they wrote back and it's like, they don't want to move right now. Would you like to have a meeting and like get together?
Wow.
So we got together, great conversation. Um, he told us a lot about the property. They had moved out of it 2 years ago and put it on Airbnb, but it was an extremely special property to them. They didn't have to sell it financially. They had built it originally as like their forever family home, and then 2 years before had decided to buy 80 acres just a little bit east of us and move out there with like other of their like extended family. So it was like they did not actually have to sell the property. So it was a case of like convincing them that we love this property so much for what it was. We had no plans on developing it or changing it, like zoning it down to houses, which I think you could do on this area. I haven't looked into it because I don't plan on doing it. And then we had to move forward with, it was a very quick process from that point because I think it was early March. We had to get our home ready to list. We had a super short amount of time. I don't think I've ever spent more time painting walls. And we had a very tight time window for it to happen because, like dahlias have to go on the ground. So
Mhm.
we were kind of like, if things aren't settled and we have the properties sold by like the first week of June, like we can't do this. We have to just call it quits. So we got our house on the market. We had an interested buyer right away, which was great. But 2 weeks later, they just backed out for actually literally no reason.
Your
Their,
buyers?
yeah, their realtor was like, I don't even know why. They just decided, nope. They'd already gotten the inspection done. Everything was fine. And the part that was super frustrating to me was that they dragged their feet for 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, we don't have time. Like,
Don't you understand? Dahlias have to go in the ground.
right. So back on the market it went. And, honestly, it all turned out for the best because the buyers that we ended up getting were exactly the people that I would have wanted to sell the house to.
Amazing.
If I had the choice, which you don't have the choice when you're selling a home, really. They loved the property. They wanted to garden, not on the scale that I did, which also worked out because they were okay with taking the stuff that I wanted, like my peonies and my roses. Um, and then after that, it just moved super quickly. And we actually completely closed 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness. Congratulations.
Exactly. But the other fun thing about it was that our original close date was May 24th, and it had to be moved up like later for a couple reasons to June 3rd, which I was bummed about just because May 24th was my birthday. And I was like,
Oh.
how special would that be? And it was also the day that my friend was moving because they were moving to South Carolina. And I just felt like
Mm.
it was like, a complete circle. So we moved the close date up, but turns out the owner of this house agreed to let us have access on May 24th anyway, which I was like, that's kind of the same thing.
Amazing.
So we started moving in on my birthday, got the field tilled up. I was able to start planting. I'm basically done. Have about less than 300, those random ones you find in a crate that you forgot about. You're like, oh,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I have left. But it was just like there were moments when I thought it would all fall through. Um, but it was just, yeah, it was just amazing. And being able to find the right property that we both loved and that like checked all of our boxes off market was pretty awesome.
It feels like it was meant to be. The fact that you weren't even looking you went on Airbnb for your friend,
Right.
and there's this property in front of you,
Yeah.
and the stars all aligned for you that you were prepared. Obviously, you had such a clear supervision or super clear vision
Yeah.
that when you saw it, you knew that
Yes.
this was it, which is incredible. And then the fact that you and your husband were on the same page and that
Right.
people were open to the conversations. I remember you shared some of this with me throughout the process because most of the listeners know that we're still looking for land. And so I instantly went on Airbnb and I've reached out to a few people and I have not had the same luck as you. So like it was totally meant to be for you, which is incredible that
Yeah.
it opened up like it did.
I feel very grateful, honestly. And I do feel 100% that it was meant to be because there were like finer details that, I'm not going to go into for sake of time that would have completely thrown the entire deal off, but they just worked. Like it just got solved. Like the problem got solved in just a way that was kind of out of the blue. So, yeah, both my husband and I still are pinching ourselves and just so grateful for how it turned out um, and feel so at peace about it because I don't think anybody likes moving, but we were both, we don't want to move again unless it is the right property in like the
Mhm.
right space. And we just feel like everything aligns so smoothly that this is really where we're meant to be.
What an incredible story. And just circling all the way back to your start with flower farming, like here you found flowers as a way of healing. And it has opened up this opportunity for you to share so much beauty with the world. One thing that we haven't touched on is the fact that you have grown a massive social media following. I haven't been super active on social media lately because I've been so busy trying to still catch up from moving our farm and getting all the dahlias in the ground. But the last I checked, you're getting close to 1 million followers on Instagram. Are you over that million now?
No.
Oh,
Um,
but
yeah, it's around 740 or something. Yeah, that, I mean, I would say it's not something I super focus on, like not the numbers. And part of me just feels, I think, surprised about it. But and it's humbling, honestly. Like, I think maybe that's the better word to say, is that it's humbling that so many people are interested in my farm and what I'm doing. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. Um, and but I'm also I would describe myself as very down to earth. So it's like this fine line of being aware of that and not taking the responsibility lightly that so many people are following me for advice, but also not trying to focus on it that much because I don't ever want to be a person that I don't want anyone to ever follow me and come away with the impression that I'm arrogant or a know it all or just, you know, way up
I don't
here and everybody's way down here. Because that's not at all who I am. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind
totally.
of how I view it.
Well, I've known you since pretty much the beginning of your journey, I think, on Instagram at least, because I remember before you even had 10,000 followers, reaching out to you because I was looking for other farmers in the area. And the one thing I'll say about your journey is you have so openly shared everything. Um, and you show people the good and the bad and how to do things and how you have figured things out. And I think that's what's so beautiful is you show these beautiful pictures and videos of what people can do with their own gardens, but
Mhm.
you're teaching at the same time. And I think that's a really unique thing about you that makes your farm and what you do so special. And you're truly sharing that beauty with others. So
Oh,
thank
well,
you
thank
for
you.
doing that.
That means a lot because honestly, that is my goal. Is I think that there's so much you can do even if you don't have a large space, which I mean, a lot of people would say that 6 acres is large now. Although I've also get DMs from people saying, I have 50 acres. Is that enough to like start a flower farm? And I'm like, lady, start with half an acre. Tell me how you feel after that.
Yes. Oh
Uh,
boy.
but you really don't need, especially if your goal is just to grow flowers for yourself and have enough to give away to all your friends, you do not need a lot of square footage. And I know
Absolutely.
that's something that you talk about a lot too on your Instagram. And my hope and my goal, honestly, is just to empower people to realize how much you can actually do with a small amount of space.
I love that because that's what flowers are about is that
Mhm.
healing and spreading that beauty and experiencing the joy that comes from growing them. And I just love that. Love what you were able to do on such a small space. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do now. Can you give us a little bit of a look into your plans for this summer? I mean, 6 acres is a huge leap, especially for flower farmers. I live in an area where we have a lot of orchards. And so when I say I was farming on an acre, they're like, oh, that's such a small piece of land because they're used to hundreds of acres of fruit trees. But 6 acres, you could grow a ton of flowers. So, what are your plans?
Yeah, so my initial plan was I am mostly a no-till farmer, but we did till this year just because of the time frame of when we moved. We were basically moving at the end of May. There was no time to do anything else. Um, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with tilling. I just think that there's different forms of farming, there's different forms of gardening. People find what works for them. So we had an acre tilled. I still don't own a tractor. I had someone else do it. And I've cover cropped half of it because I intend to treat it all as no till from now on. And then about 4,000 square feet of it is a cottage garden, which was basically all the plants that I moved from my previous home. And then the rest is dahlias, which are basically the one crop that I am doing this year. I did not have the mental energy with listing a house with my kids, everything moving to do more than just that. And dahlia tubers already are kind of my bread and butter crop.
Sure.
So the goal, though, is that whole 1 acre will be in full production. And at this point, I'm not completely sure if I will take, I do want like a 1/4 acre of peonies at some point, which I know takes a while to establish. I'm not sure if that 1 acre will include that or not. Um, I'm also not sure about how many dahlias I'm going to grow. I told my husband when before I started planting, I was like, we should do 12,000
Oh my
next year.
gosh.
And he was like, uh-huh. And I'm just finishing planting at 5,000. I'm like, maybe not.
5,000's a lot because they multiply.
Exactly. I was like, and I was talking to another friend. She's like, yeah, you just have to dig and divide them. I'm like, I know. I always forget. Like, I'm like, spring me needs to have a conversation with fall me and, talk a little sense into her.
It's kind of
Um,
like having a baby. You forget the
yes,
pain and you want another. And the
yes,
dahlias until you have to divide them again. When you see those
exactly.
beautiful blooms, you want more.
Yes. So we'll see. I'm doubtful that the 12,000 will happen. I think my husband will talk a little sense into me when next spring rolls around. But I do plan on doing seed crops of some type. At this point, I'm not sure which ones they will. I think that's definitely a 2026 probably goal.
Okay.
But another big goal is to turn 1 acre. Our property is a bit of an L shape. So, like, you have the house and you have the barn, and it goes straight back, but then it um, goes to the south, and there's an acre to the south, and that's like the L. And my goal for that is to turn it into a native woodland.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's basically there's probably like 6 trees on our entire 6 acres. So that 1 acre, I want to plant a lot of native trees and native flowers, and probably I would say 80% native, 20%, those spring flowering bulbs like daffodils and just like the stuff that comes up and is just incredibly gorgeous.
Mhm.
And then mow grass paths. But basically, it's like a wildflower native woodland that's just left for nature.
That that'll be
So
amazing.
that's my goal for that. 1 acre in production, and then the rest of the property over time that we live here, which is probably going to be a solid 10-year project, is to convert the rest of it into perennial cottage gardens. And my goal long term, probably when my kids are grown, is to have a space that is a teaching garden where
Mm,
people can come and observe how you can do this in an organic, sustainable, minimal plastic use, no till method. Um, like, that's my goal. Is like, I would love to be able to eventually open it up to the community, um, and do teaching in that way.
that sounds
But
incredible.
I do think that that will be after my kids are at least in their teenage years, because giving them their privacy and their child is extremely important to both my husband and I. And it's something that we don't take lightly. So that takes priority over everything.
I love that you have your priorities in line and that your children are that top priority and that you have time.
Hmm.
You your kids' time is fleeting at home and eventually they'll be
Yeah.
gone and you can totally have your place open to the public. So right now though, for those listening, they probably shouldn't try and come over this summer. It doesn't sound like you'll be open to the public.
No. And I'm very clear about that on social media. I do get a lot of questions about that, like, especially when I moved. It's like, are you going to have events? Are you going to have workshops? Maybe, but there are no definite plans for that because, my kids are not just my kids, they're my husband's kids as well. Like, we are a team working together, raising them. And we both have agreed that like their home needs to be their home for now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still very young. Um, as they get older, I'm sure that um, they'll be shown a little bit more, especially as they do more farm work. But especially too, when I started all this, like my youngest was 1, my oldest was 7. Um, they were, so young, and I didn't feel okay. And this is no judgment to anybody who does, because I completely respect all parenting positions, but I didn't feel okay putting them online for a lot of reasons. Even more so now, that's something I have to really think about with the following that I have is like,
Mm-hmm.
what is okay? I still don't feel comfortable showing like identifying features of them. I think that we'll get there eventually, especially as we convert more to a family farm. The goal is for my husband to um, eventually quit his job, and we are just, this is our life and this is our full time work. And at that point, I think they'll be in their teenage years, and I'll be fine with it. But when they were babies, I didn't feel okay. And even now, I'm just a little bit, I just don't feel like we're quite there. So, same thing with like events on the farm. Maybe eventually, no plans now.
One step at a time right now.
Yes.
Well, you have a huge adventure ahead of you, and I can't wait to follow along as you transform your 6-acre property into another amazing flower farm. And I know it's just going to be beautiful. We have covered so much today. For those who are not already following you, how can they connect with you?
You can find me mainly on Instagram at Microflower Farm. I also have a website, same name, microflowerfarm.com. That's where I sell dahlia tubers. That's where I list the online courses that I do. I try and teach a Zoom webinar on a topic that I'm super passionate about once a month, because I find that I love teaching, and that's about the schedule I can manage with my kids right now. So those are the two main places. I also have a YouTube, which has not been updated in a while. Same name though, Microflower Farm. And I am planning on posting probably bi-weekly or monthly videos of documenting how we transform this property. So if people are interested in more long form content, that's pretty down to earth, not overly edited, very vlog style of how we transform our 6 acres, because it's basically grass at this point. That's a good place to follow. And yeah, those are the three main. I am on TikTok, but I don't use it. So
Perfect. Well, we will provide links in today's show notes for all of those so that people can connect with you. Before we say goodbye today, is there anything that I have not asked you or any parting advice that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
I think my main advice is that, if you're in doubt about whether or not to start a garden, just go for it. Find something that interests you and plant it, and you'll be surprised at how much joy it brings you.
I love it. Thank you. Well, Galena, it has been such an honor to get to hear your story of how you started a flower farm looking for joy in your life and to seeing what amazing farm you have built. Now you have 6 acres, and I can't wait to continue following along on your journey. I'd love to leave the door open to have you back on, and maybe this fall you could share some of your learning lessons with us and some of your experiences of having grown from a half an acre to 6 acre and share an update on your journey with us.
I'd absolutely love that. Thank you, Jen, for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on, and good luck this summer, and we will look forward to talking to you again. Take care. Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of the Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, Don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.